Good morning and welcome to Legal Tech Live, episode 21. We're joined today with our guest, Julia Shapiro. Julia is the CEO and founder of Hire An Esquire. She is a former big law attorney. She is a returning guest, I'm going to say, and you will not see our previous interview, which I will tell you was fantastic. So we're really happy to have her back. I really enjoy every chance I get to talk with Julia. Hire An Esquire are you guys based in San Francisco now, or are you based in Pennsylvania still?
No, so our biggest office is actually in New York, and we also have an office. I'm based in San Francisco, and I'm in our office this morning.
Excellent. So you are based in San Francisco right now.
Yes.
You're also previously an adjunct law professor, former AmLaw 200 contract attorney, former big law litigator, I believe. And what have I missed, Julia? What else can you share about your experience before Hire An Esquire?
That's most of it. I went to work after law school, so that's it. That was what happened before Hire An Esquire. But good morning, and thank you for having me on the show. It's great to be back.
I'm glad you came back. I'm really excited to have you back, and I'm always glad that you're willing to come on and talk about, because it's not a lawyerly thing to do, come on live video and not have something totally prepared. So we're always excited when we have somebody who can do that. Hire An Esquire. Let's do, for those who missed the first interview and will not see that interview, let's talk about Hire An Esquire. It started in 2011. Let's do some of that, and then I know we've got a big announcement or a really cool announcement, and probably it's been about 6 months since we chatted on live video. So there's probably been some advancements in the company since that time. So that's another reason I'm excited to have you here. But tell us how Hire An Esquire began and where you were that kind of made you think, okay, I'm ready to jump up and start a company of my own.
Completely. And yes, our last chat 6 months ago seems like another lifetime ago. Not quite as much as another lifetime ago as 2009 when the company started, but definitely far back.
Oh, I had the date wrong. I thought it was 2011, but I guess I had that incorrect.
No, well, that was when we launched. So to give a bit of the career trajectory or the company trajectory, I went to law school fairly soon after college. Thought that I actually wanted to go. I planned on having some freedom and flexibility in my legal career. I went to undergrad and grad school or law school on scholarship so that I wouldn't be chained to the big law career path afterwards. But I got a little into the game when I got into law school, and it is really hard to get a job at in public interest. It's much harder to get a job at the ACLU than it is at a big law firm when you do well in law school. So I ended up on the big law path. I was a summer associate at an AmLaw 200 firm, and I thought I'd probably do for a couple of years before I went and did what I really wanted to do. Instead, best plans are always broken, or there's the saying, if you want to make God laugh, make plans.
That's right.
So already not a part of my original plan, I ended up getting very sick my third year of law school. And I ended up having to turn down a federal clerkship after I graduated because I wasn't well enough to know if I could go to work every day. It was really tough during my third year of law school. And I ended up in the contract attorney world because it provided a lot of flexibility, and a lot of my days were spent around doctor's appointments and not knowing how I was going to feel. So I ended up loving it. It ended up being something of, there was a silver lining to the dark cloud. It was an amazing experience for me. I ended up working with so many interesting people who were doing so many things other than law. And they were often integrating their legal career into other things they were doing. People were very entrepreneurial. Some were starting firms, and they were young lawyers who might have gone straight into the contract attorney world because the job market was pretty bad in 2007 when I graduated. And so they were doing document review to pay the bills. They were scanning Craigslist and doing court running and small tasks for small law firms that were advertising on Craigslist to get experience and really learn the practice themselves. Other people were opera singers and novelists. So some people would work really hard for a few months and then go on like a 6-week, like crazy international backpacking trip So to me, it just was this really cool world that I had never known existed. And I had friends that were freelancers and artists and writers. So seeing that this lifestyle was kind of possible for attorneys was really eye-opening to me. And in mid 2008, they finally found out what was wrong with me. I was diagnosed with celiac, which is kind of the best case scenario for someone that's getting sick all the time. You're not going to die. You don't have to get surgery. You don't have to go on tons of drugs. You just stop eating gluten, and over time you get better. So once I got better, I didn't want to go back on the traditional trajectory. And even if I had wanted to, it probably wouldn't be available. That was, I was diagnosed shortly before the market crashed. So it was a great time for contract attorneys though, because at that point I was at Pepper Hamilton as a contract attorney, and I got to do associate level work and other things because the hiring classes were shrunk in the following years, and contract attorneys that were trusted and were able to do additional higher level work than at the time was common for contract attorneys at a law firm. So I was doing this, I was really happy. I was taking graphic design classes, I was traveling, I was doing all of these things I always wanted to do. And I was getting to do them in my 20s instead of, when I retired, or when you normally think you get to do those things in a career. And I noticed I was increasingly helping with the staffing of contract attorneys because I just had been there for a long time and they trusted me, and I knew a lot of people in the industry. And I was shocked by how archaic the process was. And I decided that I thought that a product like Hire An Esquire existed, and I was doing some research to recommend it to Pepper and to other contract attorneys who I thought we'd probably rather work through a concept like this than through the traditional staffing agency. So I Googled strenuously for a few days and could not find any option in the legal industry at all. And I was really shocked. And again, I never planned to start a company. I meet a lot of people in this world who were like, I always knew I wanted to be a founder. Like, it was just coming up with an idea. And that had never been what I was thinking. But I actually couldn't sleep for a week or two. It was like, whoa, this is such an amazing opportunity. I can't believe nobody's done this before. I have to do something about this. Okay. So I spoke with some friends I had. I was in Philadelphia at the time where I went to law school. One of my friends was a product manager for Half.com. And I kind of told him my idea, and he helped to connect me with people who he thought could help execute on it from a design and coding standpoint. And it kind of went from there. So it was late 2009 where I put the team together of people that could help me. And we all had day jobs. I was still working at Pepper. Everybody else was still bootstrapping. Everybody else was still working at a day job. We were all working for equity. So it took about a year at that pace, with everybody having other responsibilities, to really put the product together. And then in early 2011, we opened to attorneys, got the attorneys on the marketplace. Mid 2011, we opened to both sides of the marketplace in law firms. And then it was late 2011 where I quit my job and started doing Hire An Esquire full time.
That is it. That's a lot of work that you put in between 2009 and 2011. And I want you were getting to do some we have one of our friends visiting, and I think somebody that Nicole Abood. And Nicole is Nicole. Yeah, she's fantastic, and she's saying yay for quitting legal jobs and doing something that, and she also mentioned something that I think is also quite spectacular, is not sleeping because of this idea. Like, you were so excited about this idea that you were losing sleep over that, which is a great reason to lose sleep, right? That out of passion.
It's also kind of annoying too, because it's like, I will say I really liked my life as a lawyer, and I have friends that are lawyers that are very fulfilled, and I missed being a lawyer for a lot of the time I was an entrepreneur. Even now, sometimes I do. When I have more time, I want to get back into court and do pro bono work. Like, I really liked being a lawyer. So it was kind of annoying. It was like, I'm not going to be able to sleep until I do this. But like, do I really want to give up, all this free time and all of these classes and all of this traveling I'm getting to do? So I don't summarily tell people to quit their legal jobs. I actually have friends that love it, who love law. And I think for some people, it's still a really amazing career and profession. And I think that there's still so much good that lawyers can do. And I'm still very passionate about law and social justice in the legal industry. However, for many people, the way that the path is formed, particularly in big law and other industries, it needs to have some reworking for the modern era to allow people to really enjoy practicing and enjoy the it's really intellectually challenging and fun in a lot of ways. But the way that a lot of the legal industry has been built, it makes it very challenging to enjoy those parts of law.
Yes, and I think that's why I have the passion in legal tech for some of the reasons that you just mentioned: the access to justice, future law, things like that. There's really some exciting things going on in legal tech at this time, and I think hopefully it will change the structure of the practice, as well as make it more available to others. But to get back to Hire an Esquire, and part of what you said that you really got to enjoy in your 20s that people have to wait to, and the thing that sticks out from me from our first interview is the bohemian lifestyle. Like that, your use of that word always stuck out for me because it's so interesting that you wanted to give lawyers that chance to live the bohemian lifestyle, yet what you took on eliminated your chance to do that for the last 6 years or 7 years. Tell me about that. Tell us about that.
Well, I think it's the common case of the couple where children have no shoes.
Mm-hmm.
I think even in law firms and lawyers do this, like they're so busy working for their clients that, their own issues, their own potential legal issues like estate planning tend to be a mess because they're spending so much time working for their clients, and it's a very intense job. So it was interesting. In a way, though, it's really different being an entrepreneur in that you do get to be very self-directed for a long time, especially before you take on investors.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have a board to report to. To me, that was the creation part was the most fun.
Mm-hmm.
I worked a ton. I still work a ton, but that was the kind of people, a lot of lawyers like me were introverts. It was that really fun time where you got to spend a lot of time building and developing something in your own head and without much external structure. So besides collaborating with people, and the group of people that I built Hire an Esquire with were just so amazing. My friends in Philly, they're still always rooting for us and involved. For lifestyle reasons, a lot of them weren't able to come on full time and go through the path of raising funding, but it was just such a great group of creative, smart people. And we just worked together so well building the system. And it was just a really fun process. When you really lose that lifestyle is when in late 2013, we closed a round of funding. At that point, one of my friends based in New York from the corporate world had come on board as a co-founder, and we went out to raise money. And once you have investors and you build your team, then your day is meetings, and you're overseeing the product people who are building the product, but you don't have the bandwidth to get as involved because your job is really to be selling the product, raising money, handling high level client service and customer issues, and communicating with everybody and managing. So that's the point in the breakup, in my opinion, and from my experience in the entrepreneurial process, where you really lose the more artistic bohemian lifestyle.
Okay, yeah, and that's interesting, isn't it? Like, because you've got this passion project that's now becoming something, and you're in control of it, and then now you're in less control, but you're still leading the ship. You still have to direct this into a certain area, but although you're in charge, you have people to answer to now, and that's got to be difficult. So I can't just go ahead with exactly what I want to do throughout this process. I now have to have support what I want to do and tell them why we think we should do it this way. Have you had any difficulties with that, or and have you found any joy in that, dealing with the shareholders and sharing your vision and convincing others to go with the vision that you've seen?
I think it's definitely a double-edged sword. So I will say that initially we had dreams of being a fully bootstrapped company. We never wanted to take on investors. Okay. We had these visions of it growing like a more consumer network where people just catch on. And for lawyers, that happened. We had lots of lawyers who just signed up. We had a great launch. We were getting amazing attorneys into the system. People were so excited at the concept and working this way. But there's a whole other side of our marketplace that didn't feel that way. And that very much goes into the question that Nicole's asking is, why did you take on investors? And there were a couple of reasons. And I think that at the end, investors do make your company stronger and your concept stronger, and it's a good discipline to have. But for us, we realized we had to sell into large law firms. There wasn't enough revenue to support the company initially and get off the ground from the small and mid-sized firms that we were selling to. So our revenue wasn't supporting and fueling the company for growth the way we needed to.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually, we took on our first AM Law 200 client before we got investment money. So we had a big law firm, we had smaller firms, we saw how much revenue could come from the larger firms. And to really build out a good enterprise sales process and build out a product that could support these large clients, as well as in 2012, I had decided we needed to have a W-2 product, meaning we would be the employer and insurer of record. And that was a lot to take on without any capital and to do as a really small company or a one person full-time.
You needed staff. You needed a staff to do that type of thing.
Yes, and we weren't going to be able to scale and grow quickly. I mean, the reason to take on investors is to scale and grow quickly. So we knew we had to do that, or the company would likely die. There wasn't enough money in the small firms and in the mid-sized firms and in doing a 1099 product. So we knew we had to do W-2, and for both the small and mid-sized firms, it's actually pretty lucrative too, and the large firm market, and that required capital. Okay. So in late 2013, we closed our first round and started to build up a team and scale. And I will say it was really hard for us to fundraise. Investors hate the legal industry. They hate the long sales cycles. In 2013, when we were running around trying to raise money, they were saying law firms are never going to adapt this. The legal industry is afraid of technology. So it was a tough road. But what I found is when things are tougher, you get better end results. So our investors I can't say how amazing they are and how incredibly helpful they've been. We wouldn't have the success in the building we've had without them. They just, we had a lot of experienced exited founders who were just invaluable for advice. It's so much easier when you are facing a new situation to not reinvent the wheel, to call somebody and say, is this normal? What have you done in this situation? And we had enough of a range of people that for almost every situation, there was somebody I could call on who had experienced something similar or had a playbook on how to handle it. So I actually, at this point, despite being very resistant to investors, I think it's been great for our purposes so far. And as we're growing and we're having more formal board meetings, and I'm learning more just about good corporate governance and compliance, I do think that the exercise and the discipline that investment gives you of having to set goals and metrics and then answer to somebody every quarter on those is actually incredibly helpful, especially for, more maybe slightly artistic introverted types where you can easily be your own worst enemy if you don't have some of that discipline and structure introduced into the process for you.
Well, and I have to say, you've mentioned introverted twice now, and in my experience, you are nothing like that. So if you're referring, in our several conversations, I never experienced what I would think of you as being introverted. So it's funny how we feel that way, because I think I'm introverted too, but others do not. I do want to, since we're on this topic, there's something kind of exciting. You mentioned about investors being kind of anti-legal technology because they don't want to deal with law firms, and they're notoriously hard to sell to. And you've got some sort of exciting news. I think it's exciting. I'm imagining you think it's exciting too. Will you share that with us?
Of course, yes. What's, I think, very exciting for Hire An Esquire and the industry as a whole is that Denton's, the largest law firm in the world, has set up their own separate investment arm called Next Law Labs. And Next Law Labs is doing a couple of things. They are investing in what they see as the most groundbreaking technology and shifts in the legal industry. And they are also doing things to support the companies that they invest in. And what I find is not perhaps their intention, but what I see most is really amazing for our industry as a whole is that they're setting the tone and they're setting a precedent of law firms saying, we're not going to hide from change, we're going to embrace it. One thing, when I was initially speaking to the partners and we were discussing Next Law Labs and an investment, they said something to me that really stood out. They said, we have 1%, we're the largest law firm, and we have just over 1% market share. Because of professional responsibility rules, and even without those rules, we all know even if you have, you can only have 50% of the market because you can never represent both sides, or in most cases, you can't represent both sides when you're a lawyer. Sometimes transactional you can, but for the most part, it's not a good idea to have the same counsel on both sides.
Right.
So they said, we realized that even as a major player, we can only have a small percentage of the market. And we see the opportunity to profit from and be a part of greater changes in the legal industry outside of Denton. So Nextlaw Labs is set up as a completely independent investment arm, although of course they work closely with Denton's. And it is, to me, they're leaders to other law firms that, look, there's a lot of interesting things going on in the industry. It's good for lawyers. It's good for our consumers. It's good for our clients. In many cases, it's good for the world. And instead of fighting this, we should say, hey, so maybe I can't bill my client for as many hours, but I can invest in this new technology. It's taking away hours, making associates' lives better. They get to go home before 10 o'clock every night, and everybody can profit. There's a way for everyone to get into the game. We're not necessarily antagonistic to technology because we're a law firm and this technology takes away billable hours.
That's fantastic, and I think that shows foresight on the side of big law, which in the little over a year that I've been doing this show, I've been able to see some transitions from big law firms getting involved in legal technology, and this is great because this is the biggest law firm in the world, and they have made. Is it a partnership with you? Is it a investment with you? How did that? What you can share, if you can share it.
Sure. They make, and I think this is important information to distribute for other legal tech founders, they make investments. So they make equity investments in legal tech companies. Okay. For those of you raising money, this might make more sense to you. They don't lead rounds. They go to existing rounds, and they're just an amazing value add investor, both for their connections in the industry and the insight they can provide after you're a portfolio company when they work with you. They also, I'll do another plug for them because they've been delightful to work with. They have a product manager and a CTO of Nextlaw Labs who are also very helpful in just helping you think about things from a product standpoint and a technical standpoint within the industry.
Excellent. That's awesome. In fact, I'm going to have to try and get their CEO or CTO on the show, because that's a piece of legal tech that we haven't really touched on yet, is the venture capital side or the investment side, and I think that's an incredibly important aspect. So this is great news, I think, for legal tech startups, CEOs, and what a great partner for you to have. In addition to, it really brings some credibility to legal tech. Like, we see there's a future in this, and we're jumping in. Don't you think that adds credibility, certainly, to Hire An Esquire? You have built this wonderful business that now the largest law firm in the world wants to be involved in.
Completely. And I know you said I mentioned introverts twice, and that's probably because we've been doing a lot more with personality within our product and optimizing for personality and matching. So we've been doing a lot of research, and a lot of this has been personality traits have been in my head. And I think that another person who'd be really interesting to have on the show is Larry Richard from Lawyer Brain. He's a lawyer and PhD and psychologist, and he talks about lawyer personality traits. And we had the opportunity to do a bit of work with him at Hire An Esquire. And we've always said that lawyers are slow leaders but fast followers. And working with Larry, in him describing some personality traits that are very common to lawyers and people that tend to self-select into the profession is a huge amount of risk averseness. So being the first one to do something is risky. And you in many ways, you want your lawyers to be risk averse. That's what you pay them for, to see everything wrong that could happen. So people are going to self-select who have these personality traits into this profession. So it's very protective, and it can be very beneficial for your clients when you're risk averse. But as far as changing the industry, it's not. So having a big player validate something and de-risk it is incredibly powerful within the industry of our lawyers, that we need to be risk averse to protect us and our interests.
Yeah, that is fantastic. You summed it up great in a great way, because that when you told me about it, I thought, wow, this is fantastic that somebody as large as Denton's is really willing to participate in this and to lend credibility or validate what you're doing, and I'm glad that that happened for you. I'm very happy for you and for Hire An Esquire on that. I just to kind of turn it back to, for those who don't understand how Hire An Esquire works, let's talk about the business itself. Who do you, is it a membership for both the lawyer, the contract lawyer, and is it a membership for those hiring? Do you take fees from both? If I'm a lawyer and I want to contract through you, I'm a contract lawyer, I sign up, do I pay you a fee? And vice versa, we're looking to hire a contract lawyer, do they pay a fee? I'm not sure our listeners or replay viewers may want to understand that aspect of the company as well.
Sure. And I realize I probably didn't give a strong enough overview. We are an on-demand staffing marketplace. So we help law firms and in-house legal departments find an elastic attorney workforce on demand. And we act as the employer and insurer of record in most cases. We do have some independent contractor work, but primarily we are a W-2 employer and insurer. Right. So in our model, we never charge the attorneys, we charge firms. Right. And one thing I was very passionate about in seeing the agency model and how I believed it was broken is there wasn't transparency. Mm-hmm. So you never knew how much the contract attorney was being paid. And that often resulted in really high markups and then low morale and low wages for the attorneys. So we are completely transparent. Everybody knows the markup that the firms pay, and nobody pays to join. You pay on a transaction basis, so for hours billed. Okay. And you know exactly, both sides know exactly what's going on.
Excellent. So the attorney knows what the markup that that Hire An Esquire is receiving from. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very cool. Excuse me. That's very interesting that they both sides know that, because that makes that lends to, again, that's credibility for you, right? Look, mm-hmm. This is the percentage we take, and you know exactly what your end is on this, and that builds trust, I would imagine.
Hopefully, yes.
That's the goal. Huh? And so the only ones paying would be the law firms or the corporations, and I'd like you to talk about that, because it's not just big law who are your clients, but it's big corporations with in-house, large in-house law firms essentially, but large in-house legal departments. Isn't that correct?
Yes, and the Fortune 500 is our fastest growing market segment. They've been adopting incredibly quickly. GCs speak to each other, so we've been getting a lot of referrals amongst in-house legal departments, and they've been much quicker adopters than law firms. So while we still have quite a few AM Law 200 firms, we have a growing body of Fortune 500 companies and Fortune 1000 companies. The other market segment that I find really exciting and indicative of overall trends in the industry is the boutique market. So you have a lot of large former big law partners leaving to start their own boutiques. Law is one of the few industries where there's no efficiencies in scale. Mm-hmm. So law firms tend to become less efficient the bigger they grow. So unless they adopt technology and do other things to get into
less efficient and more expensive.
Yes, exactly. So we've seen this trend of former big law partners breaking off, taking clients with them, making a couple associates and a paralegal with them, and starting their own firms, and they're still servicing the same type of clients that they serviced at their big firm. And the big law partner, as they grow and expand, and we see these practices growing pretty quickly, they want the same caliber of associate they had when they worked at a big law firm. And fortunately for us and for the industry and for them, there's a lot of big law refugees who are happy to work on a flexible basis. These boutique firms also tend to be much more flexible with people being remote and require less face time. So we will have a situation where you have a former Reed Smith partner on the East Coast working with a former big law associate who was on the East Coast in the first 5 years of their career, and now for various reasons might be living in Kansas or Ohio and is happy to work for, a fraction of what they're being billed out, or what they would be charged by a typical agency if they were going into the office in New York. So it's still, and most of our attorneys who are working remotely say, oh, by hour, I'm still making a lot more money than I did as an associate, and I have all this flexibility. So it's a win-win for everybody.
That's fantastic. And I was going to ask that as well. You said lawyers who are working remotely. Is there how many are working remotely versus how many are being asked to go into a law office or a Fortune 500 company office? Is it a pretty significant portion who work remotely?
So I would say we probably have like 25 to 30% of our network working remotely. And I don't know if that's indicative of the overall industry or just our client segment. I do see now more Fortune 500 companies happy to engage in what they call geographic arbitrage, particularly for commercial contracts review and other sort of high volume work where they want somebody on board consistently, but one week they might have 20 hours, the next week they might have 2 hours, they might not have anything for a couple of months. So that's one trend that I see, as well as from the boutique firms. So I do think that people are becoming more comfortable with remote, although another trend we're seeing in the corporate market is budgets being cut and not having enough money to hire headcounts full-time or permanently. So working with the contract attorney that's coming into the office and is functioning effectively like an associate GC or a permanent employee. And then when budget opens up, if they've really liked working with the person, they're hiring them. Okay. So that's also an emerging trend we're seeing is procurement budgets become cut. And it used to be that from what I hear, I'm speaking to in-house legal departments every day of the week. And what I hear from people that have been around the block for 10, 20 years is that nobody used to bother us. We used to be, delicate geniuses where nobody questioned our budget. Just make sure we don't get into trouble and it's all good. Right. And now they're under the microscope like other departments and they need to justify their budget and their spend and their outcomes.
And this is happening. We see the articles every day happening to AmLaw 100, AmLaw 200 as well, right? There's a lot of mergers taking place, and the companies who are hiring these firms for litigation are tightening up the budgets for litigation. So we're seeing people really pay attention to legal spend.
Completely. And that's why the industry is changing. It was never going to change from within. It's been external pressure. And what I see, the trends that I see, and we have an infographic on this because we see and hear this every single day, and then the research backs it up, is that more of our GCs, they're going to certain brand name firms for bet the company litigation or key strategic business matters. The majority of the transactional work more routine litigation is being outsourced to mid-sized firms in low-cost markets. So there's a rather prominent firm out of Kansas City that's doing very well and gets a lot of like corporate litigation, routine litigation. And then they're also working with legal service providers for a lot of other things that they used to use law firms for. So every GC I talk to has been hacking up their budget in a certain way where they have, certain things are high end, certain things are mid-range. And then there's, this is really routine commoditized work that can go to a legal service provider. So there's I don't think there's any indication that things will ever go back to where the big law firm gets every piece of business from top to bottom. Right.
Yeah. And one of our regular attendees, Jay Giuliano from Pat Deck, he really opened my eyes to how the big law firms were operating these days in patent law and so forth, saying, look, when one of the major Fortune 500 companies has a case, they put out a request for a proposal, and these companies in the law firms basically have to sell their services. And I was still under the impression that if you're at one of the big law firms and one of the Fortune 500 companies has a case, then and you've been they've been your customer before, you probably did all their work. And that totally blew me away. I was behind the times on understanding how that operated.
Completely. And it's actually really fun in some ways because of the buying power of the Fortune 500 clients, and especially the Fortune 50 clients, law firms that have hung up on us or told us our services will never be necessary there's nothing more fun than when one of your corporate clients says to the law firm that used to be really mean to you, oh yeah, you are working with them. We're going to have a contract directly with them and you're going to manage it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
We've seen that happen. And again, there's a certain amount of satisfaction in that.
Yeah, I can imagine. That is fantastic. Yeah. Like, oh, you're not going to do that? Well, actually you are. And that would feel good.
It's a couple years later and it's not even the same people. So no one remembers, but It's so fun.
for you, it justifies what you've been doing. Like, this is working, and it does. Yeah, that sounds like it feels great. Nicole asked a great question. We're about to wrap up here in the next 10 minutes or so, 5 to 10 minutes. Do you see yourself becoming an investor, or, and I'm going to alter the question a little bit, but let's start with hers. Do you see yourself becoming an investor in another legal tech company in the future?
Well, I'm not currently, I mean, I'm an investor with my with my sweat equity. I mean, depending on how everything ends up with Hire An Esquire, as being an entrepreneur and going without a salary for a long time in the years previous to getting funding, I don't think I would be in the position to be an investor now. But in the future, definitely, if I have the means to do so, it's something that I would be interested in. I would specifically be interested in social justice, technology that enhances social justice. My love has never been technology for technology's sake. I know many things in legal tech are branded as legal tech, and that might be necessary for some reasons. To me, I like it when the technology fades into the background and does something really amazing where you're not thinking about the technology, but you're thinking about the impact on people's lifestyle and the industry as a whole. Yeah.
And I like that too. And we try to have founders of, on occasion, I've been successful with having a founder of a social justice program that is around legal tech, but is not is for a nonprofit essentially, or not a for-profit operation, because I think that's still, they're still using technology to serve some form of legal function that is helpful to society, and I think that's really important. It isn't always about us making money, but the access to justice is a real problem, and that comes in large part from the costs or from geographical location. And if you're in a rural community, it's hard to get the type of legal assistance you may need. So I think that's great. I would just tweak Nicole's question a little bit and say, do you see yourself being a founder again? Would you start from the ground up again if you had the choice?
That's an interesting question. You know, I don't know at the moment. I love what I'm doing now, but I do dream of being a freelancer again.
Okay.
So I'm thinking that after HAE, whatever that means, I will have to freelance for a while and travel and not be in meetings and not be convincing investors and clients to buy what I'm selling for a while. But you never know what the future holds and what happens a little bit later.
Yeah. And I don't mean to put you on the spot there, but it's a significant decision in life, and I always wonder, would you choose to do that again? Because even if you love it, is it wearing you down? Is it? So I think it's interesting from the entrepreneurial perspective. Is would I do this again? Has it been or would I choose to do just something a little more relaxed? So
and I'll probably be, I plan to be at Hire An Esquire for a while. So,
right. I'm not indicating that you're leaving. Let me make that clear. I just wonder from the mindset, boy, would I want to go through this again? But it sounds, I hear it in your voice in the times that we've talked that you do really love what you're doing, and it comes across. And I imagine it's like that thing in sales where they can hear the smile in your voice. So put a smile on, because if you're making the phone call, they can hear that in your voice, and that you have that for personality of an introvert, which I have a hard time believing. You seem to do that really well, and that I mean that sincerely, that you seem to really enjoy what you're doing, and that's so great to see. With a couple of minutes left, what would you want somebody to know about Hire An Esquire that maybe we haven't covered here today?
Well, I think we've covered a lot. Okay. So I think for everybody, for people in the legal industry or anybody who's listening, I think that if you are looking for a career change and you want something more flexible, definitely check out our site. Or if you're an entrepreneurial attorney building your own firm and you're looking for a way to do that without the infrastructure that might be required by having full-time payroll, definitely look at us as well.
Excellent. And they can find you at hireanesquire.com. And I believe I found you originally at Hire An Esquire on Twitter. Where else can they find you?
We are on Facebook as Hire An Esquire, and what other social media has come up? I think Facebook, Twitter, and our website.
Okay, that's where they can get a hold of you. And from a lawyer who's looking into this, they'll be able to find out all the information they need at the website hireanesquire.com if they're looking to be a contract attorney.
Completely. And we have customer support on the site that pops up. If you have any questions, you can chat with someone live during business hours, and even after business hours, you're responded to within a couple of hours. So definitely look around. If you have any questions, reach out to us. We have a very enthusiastic customer support team that loves getting messages and is very, very excited to make potential users happier to convert them. So definitely check out our site.
That's fantastic. Thank you again, Julia. Do not disappear. I'll do a countdown so we know where to cut it off. But I do want to say thank you again for coming back on. I love what you're doing. I always enjoy talking to you, so I really appreciate it. And I do want to invite you back in the future when more great advancements are taking place for you.
Thank you. Likewise, always wonderful to speak with you, and always look forward to coming on to Legal Tech Live.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you very much. And thank you to Nicole, our live viewer, for being here. Thank you for our replayer viewers for checking it out. And thank you to, once again, to Julia Shapiro, CEO of Hire An Esquire. Always appreciate our time. And that's our show for today. And